Over the radio, someone reports a kaiju sighting at point 42 and calls for backup. Panicking on scene, a cop screams into his radio for immediate support. An officer winces in pain as a bright impact streak slashes across him. Dispatch replies over the radio that support units are already on their way. They strictly order the officers not to engage the monster under any circumstances. Dispatch screams at them to get out of there immediately as the monster lunges. The lone surviving cop gasps for breath, aiming his gun as a massive claw reaches out. A figure suddenly drops down from the sky toward the roaring beast. A flash of light slices clean through the monster, crushing it instantly. The officer stands stunned as a dark hooded man stands over the slain beast. Ray stands victorious with a glowing eye, leaving the cop wondering if he's an awakened. Over the radio, HQ announces the situation is contained and orders support units to stand down. Inside the patrol car, the senior officer confirms the order over his radio mic. He turns to his partner, relieved that they somehow survived the encounter. The young officer driving breathes a heavy sigh of relief, thanking God they're safe. As they drive through the rain, he laments how crazy the world's gotten with monsters around. The senior cop changes the subject, asking his partner how his sick mother is holding up. The young driver looks down solemnly, unable to give a hopeful answer. He quietly replies that she's the same as always, and his partner softly nods. The senior cop offers his help, but the driver tells him to focus on his own family instead. His partner calls him out, pointing out he sold his house and quit his job from being broke. The driver adds that a cop's salary can't cover those medical bills. His partner agrees, complaining about weird diseases and monsters turning the world into a mess. He adds that everything went downhill ever since those mysterious gates started appearing everywhere. He declares there is no God, though his partner mocks him for carrying prayer beads. He explains his mom makes him wear them because she is overly religious. Shifting tone, he offers to help his partner out in any way he can. Meanwhile, the officer tightly grips the steering wheel of the patrol car. He admits the doctors recommended euthanasia due to the extreme treatment costs for his family. The gravity of the situation hangs heavy over both of them. Confessing his deepest shame, he pauses before sharing his shocking reaction to that news. He admits that for a split second, he actually felt a wave of relief. Down in the ruined city streets below, stray dogs watch as a lone patrol car drives through the rain. The two officers sit quietly in their patrol car, looking out at the ruined streets. Apologizing for ruining the mood, he suggests changing the topic to something lighter. His partner eagerly pulls out his phone to show off a cute video of his child. Before he can play it, fierce barking cuts through the rainy night air. Annoyed by the distraction, they wonder if stray dogs are fighting out in the ruins. The driver suddenly senses danger and shouts a warning just as something appears. Suddenly, tires screech loudly as the patrol car comes to a sudden violent halt. Their headlights illuminate a person collapsed motionlessly right on the dark road ahead. Seeing Ray lying unconscious on the ground, the officers panic inside the patrol car. Out in the pouring rain, someone lies face down in the street, completely still. The senior officer yells for his partner to check if the victim is conscious and start emergency care immediately. Rushing over to the body, the young cop desperately begs him to hang in there and answer them. He keeps shouting to see if he can hear him, but stops short when the young man suddenly moves. The fallen man abruptly sits up, startling the officer checking on him. Beneath his messy hair, his eyes flash with a sharp green glow in the rain. He pushes himself off the wet ground and slowly forces himself up. When the stunned cop asks if he is all right, Ray reassures him that he is fine since he is an awakened. Hearing that he is an awakened, the cop admits they both got extremely lucky. The officer insists on calling an ambulance anyway, but Ray brushes him off and says it won't be necessary. As Ray stumbles away, the officer calls out to him, pointing out that he can barely walk. He keeps pleading with him to let them call for medical help. Ray continues walking off through the downpour as the two officers watch in confusion. The officer calls out after him, confused by his refusal. Ray pauses, turns back around, and tells them he actually has a favor to ask. Correcting himself, he calls it a threat instead, warning them that news of police hitting a civilian wouldn't look good. He promises to keep quiet about the accident, but says he expects something in return. Ray reaches out and hands a small box over to the bewildered officer. Revealing his full name as Domodo Ray, he commands them to guard it and give it to nobody else until he returns tomorrow. Before the officer can argue, Ray suddenly bolts away at incredible speed. He darts across the ruined street like a blur, leaving the cops frozen in shock. Staring after him, the stunned officer remarks on how insanely fast an awakened can move. He stares out at the ruined city landscape, still completely unable to process what just happened. Meanwhile, a figure walks down a dark rain-soaked alleyway in the middle of the night. His boots splash through deep rain puddles as he dashes down the dark alleyway. Leaning against a wall, Ray mutters that today is the absolute worst and he needs to hide. Suddenly, a shadow lunges out from the darkness right in front of him. It turns out to be just a stray black cat meowing in the rain. Ray relaxes, realizing it is just a harmless cat trotting past him. Behind him, an elderly woman appears calling out for her lost pet Tama. The old woman asks if he has seen a cat running around nearby. She keeps hobbling closer, explaining that her cat must have fled down this alley. Ray glances back through the pouring rain, his dark eyes sharp and guarded. He points down the street and tells her the cat went that direction. His eyes widen in shock as a sudden wave of killing intent strikes him. Before he can react, blood sprays as a blade plunges right into his side. The old woman grins creepily with a glowing red eye, calling him a thieving furball. Ray groans in pain and immediately counterattacks with a powerful strike. He cries out as the giant meat cleaver tears out of his torso. The attacker chuckles darkly while crouching on the ground in front of him. Two shadowy figures emerge behind the disguised killer, accusing Domoto of putting them through hell. The old man sneers with glowing eyes, blaming everything on Domoto's betrayal. Meanwhile, an officer in a police cap sternly demands to know where the crown is. The news reports that the awakened man named Domoto Ray has been found dead from blade injuries. Sogo watches the news on his phone, learning that the victim was a retired overseas hunter. A reporter at the crime scene adds that police are actively investigating the details of the incident. Panicking over the news, Sogo calls his senior colleague to ask if they need to report yesterday's car accident. His colleague casually reveals he already filed the daily report, leaving Sogo completely stunned. The senior officer reassures him that he took the blame for driving, protecting Sogo's pay so he can afford his mom's medical treatment. As Sogo expresses his gratitude, his colleague jokingly tells him to treat him next time. Suddenly, the doorbell rings while Sogo is still on the phone. Wondering who could possibly be visiting at this hour, he tells his colleague to hold on. Sogo heads to the entrance and opens the door to check who is outside. A voice from the phone asks who is at the door. In the dark red glowing eyes glare out with a menacing look. He listens intently on his phone. Hearing strange noises, Sogo calls out on the line to check if anyone is there. Sogo shrugs off the noise as a mere salesman and casually wraps up his phone call. Recalling Ray's stern warning not to hand the mysterious box to anyone, Sogo debates logging it as lost property. Sogo frowns in deep thought, hesitating for a moment. Unable to resist his curiosity, he decides to finally open the box and see what is inside. He lifts the lid to reveal a glowing green crystal inside. He stares at the glowing gem in utter shock, watching bright energy pulse around him. He gasps as his hand moves toward the artifact against his will. Down below, a glowing green gem pulses with wild energy in the darkness. Ray suddenly finds himself standing in the middle of a starry expanse. He looks around in sheer disbelief, wondering where he has ended up. Turning around, Ray spots a cloaked figure standing quietly nearby. The mysterious person lowers their head and calls out Ray by his real name. He panics and tells the terrifying figure to stay back. Ray sits alone on the floor, gasping for breath as panic sets in. He clutches his side where he was stabbed, desperately trying to steady himself. He kneels on the floor surrounded by empty food containers. Sogo realizes he is starving to death and desperately needs food. His phone rests on the table as an incoming call arrives. Sogo answers the phone and talks to his chief. After checking the clock, he quickly agrees to take his shift right away. The patrol car speeds down the road. The police officer grips the steering wheel of the patrol car, gasping for breath as panic sets in. He suddenly feels that something is wrong with his body. He realizes his vision is blurring, his hands won't stop shaking, and everything around him moves in slow motion. His senior colleague asks what is wrong, but Sogo stays silent. He just stares ahead with a tense look. He notes that the weirdest thing of all is that Sogo is sitting right next to him. Sogo sweats nervously as he processes the tense situation. He stands with his arms crossed, deep in anxious thought. He sits in the patrol car complaining that God must not exist since his devout mother pesters him endlessly over his protective bracelet. The vehicle drives quietly down the street. His senior colleague breaks the silence to offer him a batch of homemade pickles, straight from his own mother. Sogo politely declines the offer, mentioning that his own parents already have more than enough at home. His colleague simply acknowledges it with a brief nod. Moments later, Sogo beats himself up over the slip-up, realizing with a chilling grin that he totally blew his cover. Domoto flashes a wild grin and admits he really messed things up. The patrol car suddenly swerves hard across the asphalt. Sogo gasps in sudden panic as things escalate. The vehicle spins out of control and slams straight into a barrier. A police officer reaches across the patrol car towards the driver who struggles with the wheel. Sogo tumbles out of the wrecked police car onto the pavement, gasping for air. Bruised and sweating, he realizes he has to run. He sprints away from the crash site down the crowded sidewalk. Smoke billows from the damaged cruiser as bystanders stare in shock. Smoke continues pouring past the doors of the abandoned patrol vehicle. Saeki steps out of the wreckage and asks if the suspect got away. He pats his head, wondering about the crown, and concludes it must be hidden elsewhere. He questions whether the suspect is really an awakened given his unnatural agility, though records show he was just a gymnast. Noting that the suspect picked up on their remarks about his hospitalized mother, Sogo realizes the hospital is right nearby. Demoto grins with a glowing red eye, deciding that parents must take responsibility when their kids screw up. Saeki catches his breath in a narrow alleyway while clutching his phone tightly. Saeki calls his chief on the phone, and the voice on the other end immediately demands to know who is calling. The chief furiously chews Seki out for abandoning his post and wrecking the patrol car. As Saeki tries to defend himself, the chief cuts him off and orders him back to the station immediately. Saeki stares down at his phone in absolute shock. Saeki grips his head in panic before his eyes widen in sudden horror. Saeki freezes with wide, terrified eyes. A notification pops up on his phone, showing a photograph of a patient lying unconscious on a hospital bed. Outside the hospital at dusk, Sogo rushes inside through the doors. He pushes past the hospital entrance, his expression twisted with panic. Sogo reaches his mother's hospital room, only to find the bed completely empty. Staring at the vacant space, Sogo gasps in horror and screams out for his mother. A nurse turns around in surprise, asking him if he forgot something since he is back again. Sogo's eyes go wide with dread as he stammers out a confused question. The nurse tilts her head, reminding him that he just checked his mother out a short while ago. She adds that he stated he would be taking care of her at home from now on. Sogo remembers that guy with the glowing red eyes and realizes he has been set up. Without a second thought, Sogo spins around and bolts out of the hospital. Running through the dark streets, Sogo panics as he realizes they took his mother back to the house. Sogo bursts through the door, weapon drawn, desperately hoping his mother is okay. He catches his breath in the dim hallway, gripping his gun as he peers around. Turning the corner with his weapon raised, he spots someone lingering in the shadows ahead. His eyes widen in sheer shock at the terrifying sight waiting in the dark room. Sogo screams out in panic before silence falls as he wonders how long until backup arrives. Someone asks how long they have left before the cops show up at the scene. Another voice replies there are about 15 minutes, which is more than enough time. They confirm the client is already at the airport to grab the goods, while their source plans to quit and hide next month. With a sinister smile, one of the men notes that the captive is finally starting to wake up. Demoto leans over a terrified Sogo, asking if he is still with them. Sogo gasps in shock as another version of his own face stares back at him. With glowing eyes, Demoto smiles and points out how weird it is to see your own face up close. Demoto's body shifts and morphs into a different form right before the bound officer. The transformed woman catches her breath, leaving Sogo staring in absolute disbelief. As Sogo muffles a panicked cry, she calmly tells him to be a good boy and stay still. Standing over them, she warns that screaming means death for him, his mother, and his little buddy. Saeki begs for his life, but she demands answers about what they got from Demoto. With glowing eyes of his own, she glares down at him and demands to know the location of the green jewel. Terrified, Saeki stammers that it is hidden inside the shoe cabinet. A man in sunglasses opens up a small decorative box resting on a table. Inside the box, the green jewel pulses with a blinding magical light. The man declares he has found the crown and orders the others to head out as planned. As Sogo begs for mercy, the purple-haired woman agrees he has nothing to do with it before stopping. Standing over the scene with cold indifference, she says she doesn't care about any of that. He stands frozen in the red-tinted room, staring ahead in total disbelief. Crying out for his mother, he collapses instantly as the brutal strike hits. Pressing a finger to her lips, she tells him to stay quiet now. She whispers that she has to make it look like a suicide right before his eyes widen. She reaches down to grab his arm as he lies helpless on the floor. Trapped and terrified, he asks why this is happening and what they ever did to deserve it. He stares in absolute terror as the horror unfolds around him. Calling out for his mother, he breaks down completely. She pins his arms down tightly against the floor. With his final breath, he gasps out Sogo's name. As Sogo lies helpless on the ground, he urges his friend to run, but the attacker just mocks his concern. She coldly points a gun right at him, bragging that his friend is already dead and he is next. Suddenly, a surge of green energy ripples through the dark. Nearby, a man tells his companion to hurry because they are burning the place down anyway. He stops short in his tracks as something catches his attention. Out of nowhere, an attacker leaps into the air toward him. The surprise blow sends him crashing to the floor in a heap. A blinding green light erupts from Sogo's arm as his dormant power awakens. Staring in utter disbelief, the attacker gasps in shock as Sogo undergoes a sudden awakening. Rei stands tall as green energy surges through his body. Staring in disbelief, she wonders if he is actually awakening right in front of them. She notes in alarm that his broken arm healed instantly and his strength surpasses level 7. Coordinating their attack, she tells her partner to swing from the left while she flanks right. Without a word, her ally immediately draws his weapon. Reacting to the sudden rush, Damoto gasps as his attackers close in. An attacker launches a fierce kick that sends his weapon flying. Damoto catches a swift incoming strike with his bare hand, blood dripping from his palm. Total shock takes over as he catches an incoming strike with his bare hands. He pushes back against the onslaught, holding his ground against the duo. He lunges forward with a furious roar. He catches his breath, panting heavily from the intense struggle. He coughs up blood, letting out a sharp cry of agony. A sudden, brutal counterattack strikes him square in the chest. The sheer force hurls him backward through a wall of glass. Clutching his bleeding hand, he vows that he will never forgive this. He stands over his opponent, raising a weapon to strike. His eyes widen in sudden absolute shock as the tables turn. A woman delivers a powerful high kick while a man reacts and slides back across the ground. He scrambles backward across the floor to dodge the blow. A sharp gash opens across his cheek, leaving him stunned. He stares in disbelief at the sudden turn of events. The mysterious woman glares down with glowing red eyes. Sitting on the ground injured, he tells someone to be careful. Standing right over him, the attacker asks who he is possibly worrying about. With glowing red eyes in the dark, he asks if they know how many people he has taken care of. Suddenly caught off guard, the young officer reacts with shock as the fight erupts. A character flips upside down in mid-air, while another character braces below with a knife. Managing to bring his knife up just in time, the officer blocks the plunging assault. Realizing the danger, the officer thinks to himself that his opponent is way too fast. Blinding flashes of white-hot strikes slash through the air as blows rain down. Struggling to keep up under the pressure, the officer curses under his breath. Realizing his enemy swings with massive force, he takes a brutal hit straight to the face. Sent crashing violently backward by the sheer impact, the officer cries out in agony. Damoto straddles her opponent on the floor, unleashing a rapid flurry of downward strikes. Straddling an opponent on the ground, a long-haired fighter unleashes a fast series of punches. Pinned down and bleeding out, he realizes he's about to die if things keep going this way. He glares up in dead silence, taking the brutal beating without a single word. Damoto Rei's eyes snap wide open in shock as the sudden violence hits him. He glares down in the pool of blood as a wheelchair stands right beside him. The wheelchair sits abandoned in the dark room, above the bloody chaos on the floor. A hand covers a bleeding face as the attack lands right on target. Clutching her face in agony, she cries out that her eyes are burning. She desperately tries to clear the blood from her face with a strap. Damoto Rei wraps the strap tight around her neck from behind. She gasps for air as the chokehold cuts off her breath completely. Damoto Rei collapses to the floor afterward, coughing and gasping for air to survive. Caught in the tight hold, the woman lets out a silent gasp as her breath gets cut off. Meanwhile, Sogo collapses onto the floor, his entire body trembling violently from exhaustion. Struggling to catch his breath, he tries to speak before sudden flames erupt all around him. Surrounded by a wall of fire, he cries out in shock at the sudden inferno. Ignoring the blazing heat, he forces. As someone stumbles away into the fire, Sogo desperately calls out for them to wait. Then, a figure reacts in alarm to the spreading danger, himself up to escape the burning room. Overcome by the heat and smoke, Sogo crashes hard onto the wooden floor. Laying flat on his back, he realizes in panic that his body refuses to move. A strange and overwhelming hunger suddenly takes over as the flames consume everything. Lost in the blazing inferno, Sogo calls out for his mother and Sogo, bitter that no god answered his desperate pleas. He desperately begs for a single wish, willing to pay any price. Flames engulf the surrounding area as he lies injured on the ground. With glowing green eyes, he screams out for the power to kill them. Overwhelmed by a sudden hunger, he gasps in pain. He struggles to his hands and knees amidst the blazing fire. Dragging his battered body forward, he pushes through the flames. Opening his jaw wide, a surge of fierce energy courses through him. Saeki scrambles away in sheer panic down a dark corridor. Running for his life, Saeki curses that the guy is an absolute monster. Suddenly, a figure crashes right through a burning window above. Domoto lands heavily on the alley pavement, blocking Saeki's escape. Saeki gasps in absolute terror at the sight. Desperate and terrified, the man begs for his life as he tries to get away. He collapses violently onto the pavement. Bystanders scream out in absolute shock at the gruesome sight. A revolver is lifted into the frame under the dim twilight sky. Standing over his victim with glowing green eyes, Domoto coldly tells him to die. Suddenly, armed police officers pull up in patrol cars, shouting at Saeki to drop his weapon immediately. Heavy rain falls relentlessly over the city under dark, overcast storm clouds. Rain pours down onto the exterior of the West Police Station building. Inside the interrogation room, Saeki gets grilled as his colleague reads out the brutal news headlines about his alleged crimes. Saeki adamantly denies killing his mother or Sogo, insisting that other guys were responsible. His interrogator leans in close and demands to know why he ate a woman's corpse, leaving Saeki sweating in silence. The investigator offers to read the damning statement right back to him. The officer reads out a ridiculous self-defense claim about assassins trying to steal a jewel. Calling out Saeki Minato by his full name, the investigator tells him to make his lies believable. He points out the damning camera footage and fingerprints, warning that Saeki is heading straight for the death penalty. Refusing to crack further under the pressure, Saeki simply demands to speak with a lawyer. Kizo sits in silence, staring down at the prisoner. He slides a confession paper across the table, offering to write down that the prisoner showed genuine remorse if he signs. Sogo stares back with dead, exhausted eyes. Warned that refusing might mean life in prison, Sogo coldly demands a lawyer instead, leaving Kizo speechless. Kizo's face twists in quiet fury. Snapping, Kizo slams his hands on the table and yells at him for having the nerve to push back. He storms toward the door, telling Sogo to brace himself. From then on, the interrogation turns brutal. They strike him across the face without holding back. Believing awakened individuals heal fast anyway, the officers beat him mercilessly. Lawyers and officials cycle through the room, pressuring him. Even his legal counsel tells him to just confess and avoid execution. Trapped in the dark, he is dragged down by a chain. As the beatings just keep coming under the night sky, he sits trapped in despair. He wonders how many days have passed since then, while sitting all alone in the dark room. He learns his mom was cremated last night and blames himself for taking that jewel. He grips his arm tightly in deep regret. Apologizing through his tears, a few more days pass by. Then prisoner 103 is ordered to move out. As Saeki is escorted out toward a detention facility, a swarm of aggressive reporters bombards him with hostile shouts and wild accusations. Stones fly through the air, and Saeki winces as an impact hits his head. Amidst the violent uproar, the officers rush to shield him and order everyone to get him into the vehicle immediately. Someone from the furious crowd screams for him to die just as he is being pushed inside. A police car sits parked outside while a dark-haired man with blood on his face stares down. Inside the vehicle, Saeki sits with a bleeding wound streaming down his face. The vehicle stops, and an officer tells him to get out. Saeki steps out of the car and faces a grim stone-walled enclosure. An officer orders him to move it forward. Domoto walks down the gloomy steps escorted by guards. He looks around in shock, realizing they are heading through an underground passage. Domoto gasps in surprise as he steps into the gloomy space. A set of stone stairs leads down into a dark tunnel-like facility. Several handcuffed prisoners stand waiting by a massive rail transport. A commander orders the guards to load everyone up, and an officer salutes back. The heavy gears of the massive armored train begin to turn. Bright headlights pierce the dark tunnel as the vehicle rolls forward. Kizo steps forward to introduce himself as the head of the railway police unit. He explains their mission is to transport the prisoners safely, but warns against any suspicious moves. Kizo warns that failing to follow instructions comes with heavy consequences. The commander states they are fully authorized to take any necessary measures. He looks sternly at Domoto and finishes by stating that lethal force is on the table. Someone tells him to keep that in mind and cooperate, concluding that is all. Guards stand ready outside the secure prison door. A train travels along the tracks through the dark night forest. Domoto Ray thinks the northern detention facility doesn't sound pleasant, reflecting on how government funding went entirely to the military after the gates appeared, weakening the police and judiciary while corruption grew. Demoto Ray figures even someone at the bottom could feel those changes before brushing it aside. He wonders what that strange feeling earlier actually was. Demoto Ray notes that the place is freezing and yet he feels something else. He sits quietly beside another inmate inside the cold transport area. Demoto Ray wonders why the officer next to him is sweating so much. He figures he's just imagining things until a sudden question crosses his mind. As the vehicle rattles along, someone wonders if they have just entered a tunnel. Demoto Ray notices that despite the tense situation, an unnatural drowsiness is creeping up on him. Inside the dimly lit compartment, several handcuffed prisoners sit in heavy silence. Demoto Ray's eyes slowly drift as he fights off the overwhelming sleepiness. Demoto Ray gasps awake with a start as a sharp shock hits him. Demoto Ray reacts in shock as the sudden danger unfolds before him. Saiki Minato groans out in pain as he takes a sudden hit. He gets slammed hard against the wall in a flash. A man in a prisoner uniform falls backward onto the floor, shouting out in pain. Clutching his bleeding side, he realizes he's been stabbed and wonders who these guys are. Realizing the danger, he wonders if they are actually trying to kill him. Counting 3 attackers at first, he suddenly corrects himself as he remembers there were 4. Another strike lands, forcing him to groan in pain again. He spots yet another threat closing in on him. The bald man towers over him, confirming if he is indeed Saiki Minato. Demanding to know who his attacker is, he frantically asks why he is being targeted. He reasons that the cops outside surely would have noticed all this loud commotion. Realizing something was off all along, he concludes this whole setup was meant to kill him. He gets struck during the chaotic transport brawl. The violent struggle continues as a brutal punch lands squarely. He cries out in pain after taking a devastating hit to the face, while his attacker curses him out. Blood splatters through the air as another heavy blow connects. Demoto Ray retaliates with a vicious counterattack using his restrained hands. Demoto Ray reacts in shock as a dropped weapon slides across the floor. Blood sprays as an inmate takes a severe wound to the throat. He gasps out in agony as the heavy chains jerk him violently backward. He finds himself cornered as one of the attackers lunges forward, screaming in pure rage to finish him off. An angry man raises his fist to attack a dark-haired man among sharp impact lines. With an explosive surge of strength, he shatters the heavy metal chains binding him. Demoto Ray absorbs the blow, his eyes suddenly flashing with a fierce, unnatural green light. The attackers recoil in sheer disbelief as Demoto Ray breaks free from his restraints. Demoto Ray launches himself forward and slams directly into his startled opponent. The captured guard stares in wide-eyed shock as the tables completely turn. Demoto Ray catches his breath, panting heavily from the sheer physical toll of the struggle. Heavy iron chains lie shattered and discarded on the floor beneath him. Demoto Ray grits his teeth in pain as he powers through the remaining obstacles. More chains snap violently apart under the overwhelming pressure of his awakened strength. Demoto Ray drives forward relentlessly to finish breaking his bonds. He stands in chains inside the dark transport vehicle, staring in silence. He reacts sharply as something unexpected catches his attention. Demoto Ray blocks an incoming attack with an axe. Demoto Ray cries out in complete shock as the blow lands. The attacker scoffs in satisfaction before launching another heavy strike. The heavy chain yanks Demoto Ray violently off his feet. He gets slammed hard against the metal interior of the vehicle. The assailant looms over him, mocking his awakened powers as unimpressive. Demoto Ray lies defeated on the floor as his opponent stands guard. Angered beyond measure, Demoto Ray glares up and curses the killer. Demoto Ray's hand grips the chain tightly as he prepares to fight back. Hanging by his chains, the bald inmate taunts him, asking if he is still struggling. An attacker kicks him while shouting insults, calling him a half-dead piece of trash. Demoto Ray grits his teeth in frustration, realizing he cannot summon any strength and worries he won't survive at this rate. Demoto Ray's eyes widen in sheer shock as a sudden shift unfolds. He suddenly launches a counterattack, flipping the tables on his captor. The bewildered attacker yells out in terror as Demoto Ray roars with raw, overwhelming power. After crashing his opponent into the wall, Demoto Ray stands over the fallen man in silence. Demoto Ray checks his wounds, wondering why his body isn't healing like before and suspecting his extreme starvation is to blame. Hearing silence from the cell, he thinks it's over before suddenly realizing danger is still near. Guards rush in with weapons drawn, yelling to shoot on sight as he crouches in panic on the floor. Demoto Ray panics even more, cursing his bad luck at being cornered right there. An armed officer steps forward with a rifle raised. The officer adjusts their grip on the weapon, staying on high alert. Suddenly, an attacker takes a violent hit and crashes down, leaving Demoto Ray staring in shock. Domoto Ray stutters out in utter disbelief as the figure collapses right in front of him. A hand reaches down to rip off the tactical helmet. The mysterious woman removes her gear and commands the defeated opponent to get up. She looks down with cold blue eyes and addresses Saeki Minato directly. The defeated guard lies motionless on the floor. Domoto Ray stammers in shock at the sudden turn of events. The helmet comes off to reveal the woman's face. Holding her helmet, she stares down at Saeki Minato and orders him to stand. Over the radio, someone orders the armed squad to move in and check on the escort unit's status. Down in the dim hallway, someone reaches for a set of keys, muttering that they need to hurry because time is running out. As his handcuffs come off, Saeki stares in shock and demands to know who she is. She looks right back at him with a calm gaze and says she is on his side. She reveals she belongs to the Public Security Investigation Division and is working undercover, adding that his injuries look pretty bad. Before Saeki can finish his question, she suddenly presses a glowing green vial against his arm, making him cry out in surprise. As the strange serum floods his system, Saeki gasps for breath, and she flashes a smug little smile, asking if he is surprised. She explains it is a healing potion made for awakened ones packed with painkillers, telling him he will be relying on it from now on as he pulls up his shirt to check his body. Removing her headgear, she introduces herself as Kanbayashi Akari and tells him to follow her. Deep in the dark and silent tunnel, a heavy rumble echoes through the empty corridor. He bites his glove in frustration, asking why they aren't going in yet. Outside the door, the tactical team insists they can't breach blindly and need to check the situation first. One of the armed officers curtly acknowledges the order. Panicking, Saeki curses his luck and wonders how a quiet scheme for easy money turned into this mess. He quickly decides that if he and the cops stay quiet, they can clean this up by subduing the unarmed prisoners. Suddenly, a flashbang clatters to the floor as an officer yells for everyone to get down. Saeki stares wide-eyed in horror at the sudden trap. A blinding flash erupts in the hallway, drawing a desperate scream from the men. Footsteps pound violently against the floorboards through the blinding glare. Akari bursts through the smoke in tactical gear, her sharp gaze fixed ahead. She dashes swiftly down the corridor past the disoriented officers. Without missing a beat, Akari delivers a brutal strike straight to Saeki's face. Domoto sprints through the railway car while armed guards open fire around him. Armed tactical officers take rapid gunfire, glowing with sparks and impacts inside a dark space. One of the guards cries out in pain as she launches a surprise blade attack. Then Akari catches her breath after dropping the enemy, looking completely unfazed. A downed guard desperately calls into his radio for immediate reinforcements from the escort unit. Catching his breath, Sogo worries aloud whether he only hurt the guard by aiming for the vest. He stands in the dim interior, staring in tense silence. Ishida tells the others to secure each car starting from the front. With a weapon check, Ishida rallies the team and tells everyone to move out. Akari asks Sogo if he has a handgun, pointing out that her rifle packs much more firepower. The dark-haired man just stares back with a tense, wide-eyed expression. Sogo admits he is simply much more used to a handgun, and Akari understands. Akari tosses him a sidearm, warning him to avoid headshots since killing officers will complicate things later. She tells someone to put them to sleep and worry about the apologies later, prompting an angry shout from him. He lunges forward, grabbing the barrel of the tactical rifle with his bare hand. The firearm discharges directly into his grip, sending a blinding flash and blood flying. Sogo gasps in pain as blood pours heavily from his mutilated hand. With fury in his eyes, he rears back his fist to deliver a devastating counterattack. A man looks at his bleeding hand in disbelief after stopping a blow barehanded. Sogo catches his breath, leaving Akari utterly stunned at how he fought barehanded. Someone asks if he wants a potion, and after he agrees, another voice suddenly calls out in shock. Akari demands to know who the intruder is and why he is wearing Chief Nishimura's uniform after she had posted guards on him. Habu responds that he took Nishimura into custody at his home this morning, noting that the corrupt cop held out well. As a terrified guard sits cornered, he is told that cooperating is his only choice. Trembling in fear, the captive officer immediately caves and asks what they want him to do. She orders him to report that the threat is contained and claim that Saeki Minato was shot dead. Outside in the dark night, a helicopter flies above the second central tunnel as public security takes over. The area around the railway tunnel is completely locked down. Akari glares up at the hovering chopper and complains about the media. Habu lights a cigarette, agreeing before pointing out that she really pushed things too far. Habu admits there is no guarantee their risky plan will actually work out. Akari looks back at him and insists with absolute confidence that it will succeed. Habu figures the police won't want their slush fund exposed either, meaning a formal apology should smooth things over. He suddenly snaps and complains that things could have gone much smoother if someone hadn't gone completely overboard, leaving Akari standing in silence. Habu smokes a cigarette while complaining that stress has been killing him, but admits that experienced field operatives are too valuable to lose. He tells her he's just glad she made it out safe, and she naturally agrees as medical workers wheel a stretcher past them. Workers in protective gear carefully handle a heavy body bag lying on the ground. Habu rests a hand on a worker's shoulder and orders them to load that body straight into their vehicle. The back doors of the transport van open up to reveal the body bag loaded inside. Habu gets back behind the wheel, puffing on his cigarette as he prepares to head out. From inside the vehicle, Habu gives the command to move out. The yellow transport vehicle stands parked quietly under the dim light. The rear compartment of the vehicle clicks open. Sogo wipes the sweat from his forehead inside the bag, looking exhausted and tense. A hand pulls down the heavy zipper of the body bag. He wakes up standing in a massive, unfamiliar room and wonders aloud where he is. Suddenly, someone greets him, making him spin around with a look of pure shock. A team of agents steps into view behind him. Their leader introduces himself as Habu Takamichi from the Public Security Investigation Division and asks to talk. Flashback 11 years ago when everything changed. A massive blue anomaly tears open the night sky above the city. Mysterious gates open up, unleashing hordes of deadly kaiju that threaten the entire world until nations finally form alliances to fight back. Amidst the brutal war, ordinary people suddenly awaken with transcendent powers, earning the name Awakened. Their abilities help predict gate locations behind massive walls, but once peace settles, nations start fighting over the powerful cores found inside the monsters. One of the investigators notes that they have been tracking a certain organization for a while. Ray looks surprised, asking if it is an organization they are dealing with. Akari explains that their true identity is a mystery, but they are a foreign force tied to espionage, abductions, and the gate incident from 11 years ago. Habu points out that their main work is biotech and kaiju bioengineering, before asking if Ray recognizes the research. Ray denies knowing anything about it, looking visibly confused by the documents. Habu explains core engineering as the study of the powerful hearts of higher-tier kaijus, prompting Ray to ask if that research is leaking. Akari confirms the leaks and admits they struggled to track these scattered cells until finding a lead. She reveals that Keizo accepted a large sum of money to assassinate Saeki. Akari adds that the same group likely killed his mother and friend, leaving Ray silent and troubled. Ray realizes that the green jewel he received was actually a kaiju core, and they were after it. Akari explains that rumors claim a core can artificially awaken humans, and they believe that is what happened to Ray. She warns that whoever gets that core could create an entire unit of awakened individuals. He sits with his back turned, questioning if Damoto Ray, his mom, and Sogo all died because of that core. Kanbayashi Akari and Habu Takamichi stand silently together in the room. He breaks down crying in his hands, blaming himself entirely for accepting that core. Kanbayashi Akari looks down with a solemn expression. Habu Takamichi stands facing away in quiet contemplation. Someone reports over the comms that they secured the crown, and the head researcher has started extraction. He asks about the deadline, and she responds that they should barely make it in time. He asks about witnesses, and she confirms they were shot during transport as planned, prompting him to simply reply that he sees. Habu sits alone with a glass of drink, remarking that a situation is quite a shame. He adds that the commander of Ergo 6 has requested a meeting. Because the team lost 2 men during the operation, Habu tells Kanbayashi Akari to prepare condolence payments before he meets him. Kanbayashi Akari argues they are just mercenaries and there is no need to bow to them. Habu acknowledges the operation was forced and rushed, insisting they should at least show some sincerity. He instructs strategic planning to avoid flashy moves for now, warning that someone is bound to start chasing them after all this attention. Habu collapses to his knees in agony, while a concerned woman looks on in shock. Clenching his teeth, he demands the protocol be updated immediately, while Kanbayashi Akari rushes over to ask if he is all right. He pours several pills into his palm to cope with his condition. Habu quickly swallows the medication, covering his face with his hand. Kanbayashi Akari warns him that he will ruin his health at this rate, and he replies that he will be careful. Bowing politely, Kanbayashi Akari excuses herself and departs. She walks away down the corridor. Ray stands by a massive window holding a glass, quietly reflecting as he gazes outside. He mutters to himself that everything is going just as he thought. Down below, the vast city stretches out under the night sky. Elsewhere, mourners gather by a graveside in the pouring rain, finding the bitter scene beautiful. Someone notes how human civilization is forged through blood, sweat, and endless labor. Ray declares that all of this harsh progress is ultimately for the future of humanity. He reasons that compared to that grand goal, individual struggles pale in comparison. At the rainy graveside, a grieving child and woman look on in sheer despair. Ray coldly dismisses their suffering as merely a few hundred sacrifices. Back in his tower, Ray watches the rain while delivering his verdict. He concludes that those lives lost are ultimately insignificant. Ray stands outside in the rain, looking down at the street below. He stands quietly under his dark hood while the rain pours down. Akari explains that their goal is to capture them and stop any more victims. She asks if he will lend them his strength. Ray grits his teeth in deep frustration under his hood. A painful memory flashes back as someone sits surrounded by roaring flames. The fire burns intensely around the motionless figure. Ray looks back down at the street from his hiding spot. His eyes suddenly glow a bright green in the dark. A few days later, a hospital building stands under a bright sky. Outside the hospital entrance, Ito Toma and others walk out carrying paperwork. Ito Toma looks ahead with a calm expression. Kanbayashi sits behind the wheel of a car with a faint smile. Ito Toma holds up his discharge papers while standing outside. As they drive away, Kanbayashi asks if the examination went smoothly. Ito Toma replies that it went more or less fine, and when she asks about his mutation rate, he reveals it is 2.3%. Kanbayashi admits that is quite high for just 1 week after awakening, and notes his strength should grow in proportion. She adds that at this pace, he might soon hit 7%, which is considered high even among level 5 awakened ones. Turning to him, Kanbayashi warns that high mutation rates bring severe physical and mental strain, which is only natural for normal humans. As they continue driving together, she asks him how his medical examination went. He replies that it was mostly fine, though testing his regeneration hurt a bit. When she asks if they used anesthesia, he admits it still hurt anyway, leaving her puzzled. She laughs and tells him he is exaggerating with such a straight face. He touches his face, explaining that it is just because of the recent surgery. He admits he is still not used to his new look, while she tells him he will now work as a hunter for Blanche International. She explains that it is officially a private agency, but secretly a public security organization. There he will go by Ito Toma as a rookie hunter, and he accepts his new identity. Habu stands before the team to start the briefing. He announces that since their new member has joined, he will explain everything from the start. Habu explains that he will command the operation while Kanbayashi handles field command. Kanbayashi stands quietly while a teammate glances her way with a realizing look. Realizing she holds a high rank, Ito listens as Habu states the team will split into 3 units. Habu Takamichi adjusts his glasses as he prepares to name the leaders. Kaneko K is introduced as head of the intelligence unit. Members of the intelligence team sit together inside the command room. Shono Seiya is introduced as head of the communications unit. Communications officers stand ready at their stations. Kanbayashi Akari is introduced as head of operations. The operations unit members gather closely together. Habu Takamichi speaks up to add a crucial point. Habu Takamichi reminds Seiki that he remains a civilian contractor. He explains that public security will ensure his protection in exchange for information. Habu Takamichi demands strict obedience to all instructions, and Saeki answers yes. Opening the briefing, Habu Takamichi asks intelligence for their report, prompting Keizo to mention several points of concern. Keizo rapidly types on his laptop while analyzing the case details. Keizo questions how enemies figured out so fast that Damoto Ray handed the core to an officer and why they targeted Kimura first. Saeki realizes the enemy found out through the daily report because Kimura filed it under his own name to protect him. Habu Takamichi demands to know who had access to a certain report. He listens as his teammate provides a quick update in the dark room. Jun explains that authorization wasn't enough, so they hacked the system to check the access logs. Ito Toma looks at the lineup with 3 suspects displayed on the wall, staring in total silence. Ito Toma stares intently at the suspect photographs with a blank expression. Ito Toma keeps his eyes fixed on the lineup during the tense identification process. Ito Toma recognizes every single face staring back from the suspect photos. Ito Toma realizes that one of those men must have sold him out, his eyes glowing green with fury. Habu Takamichi orders his team to set up strict surveillance around the suspects' homes and the West Police Station. Habu Takamichi tells everyone to check personal data and social media, but Kanbayashi asks if putting them under direct surveillance would apply useful pressure. Kanbayashi argues that innocent people won't notice or will report it. Kanbayashi adds that if they are guilty, they might panic, try to flee, or contact their allies. Jun agrees with the plan, calling it a method worth trying. Habu Takamichi tells the intelligence unit to move out immediately. Habu Takamichi pauses to ask if there was anything notable in Hunter Domoto's background. Hana replies that it is still under investigation as they dig deeper. He reviews the file, noting that the subject had an ordinary youth, served briefly, and got injured. He points out that after retiring, he stayed in a care facility with a low awakening rate of 6.5%. Habu finds the background far too ordinary, wondering how someone like that got their hands on that core when so much remains unknown. Habu wraps up the briefing, telling everyone that is it for today's meeting. He tells everyone to return to their duties. Meanwhile, Ito Toma walks through the hallway. Jun notices him standing by the vending machines and asks if it is his first time there. Startled, Ito Toma admits he is not sure what to order. Jun steps in and tells him to try his personal recommendation. A hot bowl of noodles with tempura is served. Jun watches him eat and asks how it tastes. Ito Toma quietly admits it is good, and Jun proudly laughs and tells him he told him so. Jun introduces himself as part of the operations unit, and Saiki immediately replies that he already knows. Hana walks up with her tray and asks if she can sit there, and Saiki tells her to go ahead. They pull out their chairs and settle down at the cafeteria table. Hana gives a polite bow and starts introducing herself as part of the intelligence unit. Lin sits quietly beside her with a steady expression while they eat. Lin quickly follows up with his own introduction for the operations unit. Hana leans in while eating and wonders aloud if Lin is from overseas. Lin explains that his mother is Japanese and his father is Taiwanese, leaving Hana surprised that foreigners are allowed. Jun points out that Lin is a special case, leaving everyone quiet and thoughtful. Lin maintains a deadpan expression while looking off to the side. Hana learns Lin got caught doing shady things and works here instead of prison because of his abilities, before Saiki shifts the topic to ask if everyone is settled into the dorms. Jun complains about how noisy it used to be when he was new, and Hana agrees that eating with everyone back then was fun. Ito Toma asks if they ever copied a statue's pose in photos, but quickly tells himself to drop it and eat. Reflecting on the meal, he notes it's been ages since he had a normal conversation like this, but that quiet moment in the cafeteria is about to be shattered. That peace doesn't last as Kanbayashi rushes in to report they've tracked down the suspect who leaked the report. Ito Toma stares in shock at the laptop screen displaying the culprit. Staring at the monitor, Ito Toma realizes the leak leads straight to Section Chief Sato. It is 4:30 in the morning, and heavy rain pours down over the pier. Saeki tries making a phone call, but an automated voice tells him the number is out of service, leaving him furious. Frustrated, Saeki smashes his phone to pieces, realizing he was thrown away the moment he handed over the money. Watching the clock, Saeki notes that the ship departs at 5, and he just needs to hold out for 30 minutes. Driven to the edge, Saeki resolves to use a mysterious device left behind if things go completely wrong. A car sits parked in the dark, rainy night. Inside the vehicle, Ray turns to his companion and asks if he is nervous. As the vehicle moves forward, his companion reminds him that confirming the suspect's face is enough since he's a civilian. Outside in the downpour, heavily armed tactical units move into position under the rain. A heavy sniper rifle is set up overlooking the dark street below. Up on the rooftop, Kanbayashi Akari radios in that the 50-meter radius is locked down with nowhere left to run. She demands a status update from every single team involved. Alpha Team and Bravo Team both report back that they are standing by. Kanbayashi Akari gives a final reminder that the target Iago must be taken alive and weapon use is strictly up to her. She calls in the next instruction over her radio. The operation officially begins. A gloved finger presses the doorbell button. Saeki calls out through the intercom, pretending they are there to inspect pipe damage from the heavy rain. The intercom camera stays dark and completely silent in response. Saeki waits outside while armed officers watch closely from the shadows. Armed tactical operatives rush forward alongside him as they prepare to breach. An officer peers cautiously through a window. She hears strange beeping sounds echoing through the rain and panics, wondering if it's a bomb. Over the radio, a teammate reports it's not a bomb after all. It turns out to be a parked truck behind the building, leaving her completely stunned. She wonders why something like this has to happen right now. The back doors of the truck slowly creak open in the dark, revealing nothing but pitch blackness inside. A tactical operative aims his rifle at the opening, stammering into his radio that something is coming out of the truck. A grotesque, pale creature with massive jaws crawls out from the cargo bed. The team realizes with horror that it's a kaiju. Amidst a sudden roar, Kanbayashi Akari desperately calls out to Bravo 1 over the radio, getting zero response. She raises her binoculars to scan the dark area, searching for any sign of her missing men. Looking through her binoculars, she spots something terrifying unfolding right in front of her. A massive pale creature suddenly grabs a soldier, leaving the squad in shock as they realize it's a pale skin. Panicking under the sudden assault, she screams out orders for Alpha and Bravo to engage immediately. The terrifying beast lets out a deafening screech as it bares its rows of sharp teeth. The tactical squad opens fire, unleashing a barrage of bullets straight at the monsters. Gunfire lights up the dark as the soldiers keep their position and relentlessly pump bullets into the approaching threat. Kanbayashi warns her team about the resilient nature of the pale skin, a terroristic kaiju, just as the injured beast shrieks in retaliation. The heavy gunfire takes its toll, and the massive monster finally crashes down hard onto the pavement. Through binoculars, Kanbayashi Akari notes that their bullets are working against the creature, meaning it is not a higher-tier species. Even so, she warns that letting even one escape would turn into an absolute disaster. A terrified man desperately leaps out through a shattered window. Sogo grips a tactical rifle under the rain, scanning the dark night with sharp tension. A vehicle speeds away down the rainy street as Sogo watches it escape. Sogo spots the fleeing car on the radio and asks if they should pursue. Sogo reports that the target has likely escaped using a vehicle. Over the radio, Kanbayashi Akari weighs their options, asking whether to chase the target or take down the kaiju. Kanbayashi Akari identifies herself over the communicator as Naziro. Without hesitation, Rei decides they will pursue, ignoring Habu Takamichi's warning to wait. Kanbayashi Akari's eyes go wide in absolute shock. A car speeds along a wet road in the heavy rain. Inside the vehicle, Rei smiles with relief, confident that this move will keep them off his trail. Saiki regrets making a frantic phone call after spotting the suspect's name in that leaked report. He insists into the phone that whatever happened to him isn't his fault, and he didn't know anything. Driving through the dark, Sakiki still finds himself shocked that the target really did kill his own mother. Suddenly, a sharp pain hits Saiki as his car gets rammed from behind on the rainy street. Saiki's eyes widen in sheer disbelief inside his vehicle. The two cars pull right up next to each other in the storm. Glaring through the window, Saiki calls the other driver a traitor, except it is Rei confronting him with glowing green eyes, demanding he stop. Two cars speed down the dark rainy street in a high-stakes pursuit. Inside the car, Saiki loses his cool and yells at his pursuers, asking if they are trying to kill him. Sogo panics in the passenger seat, but Domoto Rei tells him to focus entirely on capturing the target. Kanbayashi Akari updates the team on the radio that Iago plans to flee overseas on a ship at 5, prompting Domoto Rei to insist they stop him immediately. Saiki pulls a gun inside his vehicle, but Domoto Rei slams into him. Heavy gunfire erupts through the downpour as tactical forces engage the threat. The terrifying creature screams out in agony under the relentless fire. Someone shouts in panic that one of the targets managed to get away. The creature leaps through the air right above the tactical officer. The team panics as the creature tears through the alley, screaming at them to open fire before it reaches the houses. Bullets slam into the beast, bringing it crashing down in a bloody heap. Alpha 2 confirms the kill over the radio, just as a drone hovers overhead to report in. David Lin watches the operation unfold through his glasses with a cigarette in his mouth. Kanbayashi Akari radios in for an update, asking if they can secure the target. She waits in position on a rooftop with her sniper rifle under the pouring rain. David Lin reacts with shock as he realizes something has suddenly gone wrong on Iago's end. Domoto Rei complains about their slow car, but his driver snaps that it is just an old junker. Their car speeds through the dark, rainy area while trailing thick smoke behind it. David Lin stares intently at the computer screens while tracking his movements. He urgently calls out that the target is reaching the ship and warns that they will lose him if he boards. A sniper rifle points toward the stormy sky as Kanbayashi Akari prepares her weapon on the motorcycle. She rides through the downpour, aiming her firearm directly ahead. Keeping completely silent, Kanbayashi Akari steadies her aim from the speeding motorcycle. She pulls the trigger, unleashing a powerful shot through the pouring rain. The bullet strikes close to the fleeing car as it swerves across the wet asphalt. Frustrated by the miss, Kanbayashi Akari mutters in annoyance as she reloads her rifle. The vehicle's tires spin wildly on the wet ground. Domoto Rei watches closely with glowing blue eyes through the pouring rain. Domoto Rei leaps forward, charging directly at the fleeing vehicle to intercept the target. Heavy rain pours down relentlessly over the dark, stormy landscape. Standing out in the downpour, she calls into her radio that Doyos is checking in, while a brief report confirms that Iago is secured. Seiki Minato stands outside in the rain and lights a cigarette with a lighter. He takes a slow drag while staring blankly into the distance. Kanbayashi Akari lets out a long sigh while watching the wrecked vehicles get hauled away. Habu Takamichi walks over to Kanbayashi Akari, telling her that things are mostly wrapped up. Kanbayashi Akari chuckles and mocks Habu Takamichi for his scruffy outfit. Habu Takamichi snaps back that she doesn't look much better herself. He asks if the rookie is okay, and Saiki assures him that he is fine. He struggles behind the wheel as glass shatters around him. Rescuers call out to treat the injured first while leaving the suspect search for later. Kanbayashi Akari tells the medics to take care of the injured man. A medical worker nods and turns his attention to her. Her eyes widen in shock as a masked medic suddenly grabs her arm. Saeki Minato lies on the pavement and weakly asks about the person next to him. He anxiously asks if they are okay. Kanbayashi Akari stares wide-eyed in shock. She catches herself, noting that she was blinded by rage. Kanbayashi Akari narrows her eyes with a stern expression. Medical staff tend to an unconscious patient inside a moving ambulance. A few days later, Ito Toma walks outside while explaining that he is officially dead and cannot move freely. Chitani Hana agrees that public security life is tough. Admitting she cannot even tell her family where she works, she adds that she even has to lie about her job when attending mixers. Ito Toma points out that partners need background checks to marry, leaving her to mutter that things turned out quite differently than expected. He then suggests she find someone inside public security, specifically asking what she thinks of the handsome Jun. Chitani Hana warns that Jun is a bit of a flirt, leaving Ito Toma sweating at the thought. Ito Toma spots something up ahead and calls out in surprise. Saiki Minato looks on as she pumps an absurd amount of syrup into her coffee. She insists it's totally normal, and sweet is the best while walking down the street with him. Kanbayashi Akari reports to Habu Takamichi that everything lines up with the intel, and no more interrogation is needed. After handing over the papers, she confirms Section Chief Kaneko already got the report for a deep dive. Kanbayashi Akari asks about Saito, leaving Habu Takamichi silent for a second before he drops the bad news. He explains Saito smuggled kaiju into a residential area, seriously injuring 5 people in a narrow escape from death. Habu Takamichi notes Saito is looking at life imprisonment or even the death penalty for his crimes. Just in case, he orders Saito sent to a secret black site prison to extract everything using their privileges. Either way, Saito is never seeing daylight again, but Kanbayashi Akari interrupts to ask a sudden question. She brings up Saeki Minato, requesting to assign him as a combat operative in the operations unit. Habu Takamichi is caught off guard when she insists the guy has real potential. He agrees to take responsibility for granting him authority, provided Saeki Minato survives the brutal training program first. She explains that only about 20 to 30% of applicants make it through the survival test, asking Habu Takamichi if they will accept the candidate if he actually passes. Hearing her question, Kanbayashi Akari looks completely stunned when the condition gets even stricter. Habu Takamichi leans in with a deadpan stare and states that the candidate has to make it into the top 3 to qualify. Down in the secure underground facility, workers in hazmat gear monitor the control stations. Meanwhile, Robert is strapped securely to a vertical metallic frame in the testing chamber. Up in the observation booth, Habu watches the restrained subject through the thick glass. He turns away with a calm expression, ready to initiate the procedure. Reaching over the console, an operative presses a key and announces that the experiment is starting. Habu tells everyone in the room to put on their protective goggles. Above the testing chamber, massive overhead lights hum as they power up for the test. As the awakening light floods the room, Robert gasps in sudden shock. The blinding green radiance beams down directly onto him, bathing the entire chamber in intense illumination. The awakening process kicks off as the system reports the initial climbing rate. As the rate climbs higher, Robert grits his teeth and groans in pure agony. Robert screams out in torment as the containment chamber floods with blinding energy. He roars in agony until researchers confirm the mutation rate hits the target value of 5%. Stabilization begins immediately, prompting Habu to anxiously ask if they actually pulled it off. Overhead lights power down in the dark testing facility. A voice calls out into the room, urging Robert to answer if he can hear them. Robert catches his breath and replies that he hears them loud and clear. Habu puts him through a simple identity test, and when Robert answers every question correctly, Habu joyfully declares the crown experiment an absolute success. Robert gasps in pain as warning alarms blare across the room. He screams out in agony while the computer flashes a critical load alert. Hazmat personnel panic as vitals spike, and they immediately inject a cardiac stimulant. The drug has no effect on him. As the mutation rate climbs past 8%, Habu Takamichi orders a full lockdown and sends in the armed squad. The mutation surges past 30% at terrifying speeds, driving Robert completely berserk. Heavy boots rush down the corridor toward the laboratory. The armed operatives ready their rifles outside. The squad opens fire with full force, engulfing the rampaging subject in a barrage of bullets and explosions. Robert writhes in agony as his mutation rate surges past 50%, screaming in pain. Robert suddenly spins around and glares up toward the upper control balcony. The mutated monster crashes violently against the reinforced observation glass right in front of Damoto Ray. Trapped and terrified, Robert begs Damoto Ray to help him. With tears streaming down his distorted face, he keeps crying out for rescue. Damoto Ray looks down at the desperate creature with cold detachment, asking what he is doing. Without a second thought, Damoto Ray orders the guards to shoot him. A barrage of gunfire tears through the mutant, leaving its bloodied hands slumped lifelessly. A flustered scientist explains that a minor error popped up during the stabilization phase and begs to fix the mutation suppression algorithm. Damoto Ray stands in the facility hallway alongside researchers as they walk past a secure security door. With glowing eyes, Damoto Ray orders him to improve it immediately and compensate the family of the fallen test subject Robert as promised. He coldly tells them to call it a sacrifice for the future of humanity while looking down at the deceased subject. The researcher nervously obeys his orders, bowing low as Damoto Ray walks past him. Standing alone, Damoto Ray curses his bad luck for being pushed back to square one and wonders why the experiment keeps failing. A sudden shout echoes through the training room as recruits snap to attention. Ken Shiraiwa steps forward to introduce himself as the instructor for the Awakened Combat Training course. Looking over the gathered recruits, he tells them they possess transcendent powers, yet act completely spineless. Ken Shiraiwa angrily points out that most trainees die or fail, then demands a terrified recruit explain why he wants to be a hunter, prompting a panicked reply about wanting to save people. Ken points out that anyone who just wants to save lives could easily become a paramedic, asking why he chose to be a hunter instead. The trainee insists that because his powers were granted to him, he wants to use them to contribute to society. Ken fires back by asking if he thinks firefighters and paramedics do nothing for society, making the recruit quickly panic and backpedal. Ken then questions if he is just chasing the wealth and fame that comes with fighting monsters. Cornered under Ken's intense gaze, the recruit timidly admits that he does. Ken asks if he would still admire it, even if he ended up parasitized, soiled, and dying a miserable death. He warns that monsters aren't actually what kill hunters, but rather their own inflated egos as the chosen ones. Blaming their reckless narcissism, Ken declares that he will completely break every single one of them during the 4 weeks of training. Ken glares with a sharp expression. Calling out for number 11, Ken turns his attention to Damoto Ray standing among the line of recruits. Ken demands to know why Ray volunteered to become a hunter. He glares ahead, muttering that he is doing all of this just for revenge. He stays silent, lost in his dark thoughts. Sogo admits he only joined because of Akari, but now he sees it as his big chance. He pauses with a sharp intake of breath. He swears to hunt down the cold-blooded killers who took his mom and Sogo, vowing absolute revenge. Ken flies into a rage, screaming that it is pathetic to join taxpayer-funded training for revenge and promising to beat that attitude out of them. The instructors warn everyone that the upcoming training will be more grueling than ever, and the recruits shout back their agreement. At the public security headquarters, Kanbayashi sits at her desk reviewing documents. Kanbayashi sits at her desk going over paperwork. Kanbayashi looks up as someone approaches her desk. Kaneko leans in, addressing her directly with some news. Kaneko claims he has finally caught their tail. Kanbayashi widens her eyes in sudden shock. She asks how they managed it, and Kaneko reveals their rookie pulled it off. Kaneko points to Hana, who introduces herself nervously to Kanbayashi. Kanbayashi immediately asks how she managed to find the clues. The investigation centers around finding any clues about Akihiko Takakawa. Flashbacks reveal that during a brutal interrogation weeks ago, Saito dropped a name. Saito is beaten up and exhausted during the questioning. A battered Saito gasps out the name Akihiko Takakawa. He confesses that Takakawa was the one who gave the orders. He first met Takakawa months ago at a police academy reunion. They quickly bonded while sharing old memories over drinks. After hanging out a few times, Takakawa dropped a totally unexpected request on him. They sat together sharing a meal during one of their meetups. Takakawa smiled broadly while talking about his missing funds. He claimed someone made off with his cash and asked Saito to keep an ear out for anyone named Rei Domoto. Saito narrowed his eyes in sudden shock at the mention of the name. He promised a massive reward in exchange for that information. However, no matter how much the police investigated, Akihiko Takakawa was nowhere to be found on any graduation list. Saito looked stressed as he reviewed the case documents with Kanbayashi. Hana explains that getting into a police reunion isn't easy, wondering how he pulled off infiltrating the West Police Station and knowing Saito's past. Digging deeper, she found a real person named Akihiko Takakawa in the alumni, figuring the imposter stole his identity to trick Saito. Kanbayashi asks how they even managed to track down the culprit's whereabouts. Hana reveals they tracked him through a shipping container holding a pale skin, shocking Kanbayashi since the identification code was supposed to be erased. Saeki explains that since the missing code should have been at the port, he sifted through a month of records, finding 40,000 containers in storage and cross-checking them one by one. Kanbayashi looks over the findings and notes that 29 physical containers are missing. She adds that among the companies that ordered them, one specific name stands out as El Comercio Bolivar. Reading the folder, Kanbayashi recognizes Sergio Kitano as a person who surfaced during the investigation. She points out that he went overseas 10 years ago under his original name, Masaki Kitano, and notes his younger brother was in Saito's graduating class. Saeki continues explaining how he showed a photo of Masaki Kitano to Saito. Saeki holds a small photograph up in front of the beaten and bruised man. Saito blurts out the name Akihiko Takakawa, prompting Kanbayashi to praise Hana and suggest contacting the South American office right away. Habu laughs and acknowledges that Hana spent a whole week constantly investigating at the port. He promises to credit her for the achievement, but as the investigation finally moves forward, Hana suddenly remembers that Rei has been away at training for a week. Hana finds herself wondering if Rei is doing all right. Inside a secure holding room, a handcuffed inmate stands in total silence. He keeps his head bowed down, sweating as a heavy tension fills the air. Raising his head slowly, his eyes flash open with a fierce and dangerous intensity. Nearby, the other guards stare in absolute terror, whispering that something is coming. The prisoner watches silently in the dark, bracing himself for the nightmare ahead. A grotesque figure emerges from the pitch blackness, baring its razor-sharp teeth. Saliva drips from its massive jaws as the terrifying creature steps closer. The terrifying human-faced spider reveals itself, terrifying the guards who can barely breathe. One of the guards screams in pure agony as the horrifying monster lets out a deafening roar. Chains rattle violently as the captive abruptly lunges forward to attack the horrifying beast. Someone barks at the recruits to pull themselves together as chaos erupts. Kaneko loses his temper, demanding to know why they are getting so scared. He immediately cuts 3 recruits from the program, leaving them shocked and terrified. Suspended by heavy chains, a grotesque creature hangs silently in the training area. Kaneko explains that it is a human-faced spider, a deadly beast hiding its body in the shadows. He warns them to aim for the body first instead of the face, before asking if there are any questions. The trainees shout back a sharp no, prompting Kaneko to make them run through it all over again. Behind his dark shades, Kaneko glowers down at them and demands if they understand. Rei steps up with a fierce roar and yells back that he understands. A close-up shows a man wearing dark sunglasses staring in silence. He calls out to assistant instructor Ito, who quickly answers. He tells the assistant to pull up the records for number 78 in pit 3, and the man agrees. The file is handed over right away. Then the officer asks if something happened. Looking at the papers, he notes that the recruit hasn't closed his eyes once during training, figuring it's impossible not to feel fear. He reads the name Toma Ito from Blanche International, realizing this is the guy Akari was talking about. Asked about preliminary physical scores, the assistant immediately brings them up. Reviewing the data, he sees the recruit climbed from 67th place up through the ranks, while his mutation rate rose to 3.4%. He points out how abnormal it is to drop from level 7 to 6 in under 2 weeks, wondering if it's pure talent or something else. He flashes a smug little grin behind his dark sunglasses, finding something amusing. Rei glares back with glowing green eyes, calling it interesting. Domoto Rei stands alone in the dark, staring forward with a tense, focused expression. His eyes narrow in the gloom as he battles to pierce the heavy shadows surrounding him. A terrifying monstrous face emerges from the blackness, revealing pale skin and empty eyes. Domoto Rei's hand trembles slightly as he gasps out in the oppressive darkness. The terrifying creature lunges forward with incredible speed, opening its massive jaws wide. As the monster closes in, the countdown reaches 3 minutes remaining. The creature snaps its jaws viciously, just missing Domoto Rei as he leaps aside. He rolls across the floor to dodge the attack, regaining his footing in the dim light. A figure in dark military attire leaps and ricochets off narrow vertical walls in a dark shaft. Domoto Rei's eyes flare as he realizes his vision has finally adjusted to the dark. As the brutal fight rages on, the timer ticks down to 2 minutes remaining. The terrifying creature lunges forward with incredible speed, nearly catching him off guard. The terrifying creature snarls with glowing red eyes, ready to strike. With only 1 minute left on the clock, the beast growls fiercely as he reacts. He realizes the enemy is lurking in the darkness and wonders if it is a surprise attack. Scanning his surroundings, he quickly corrects his guard from the front to the top right. He frantically scans the corners, trying to figure out where the next blow will land. He stands alone in the dark chamber, waiting for the next strike. Domoto Rei stands alone in the center of a dimly lit circle on the ground. He looks up with wide, shocked eyes as something suddenly catches his attention. Out of nowhere, a massive clawed arm slashes down toward the prisoner. The terrifying spider creature holds the man in the air as it lunges forward. Domoto Rei grits his teeth in pain as the monster crushes him. Catching his breath, he manages to grab the beast's arm right back. He stands focused as the surrounding lines reflect his intense concentration. A terrifying spider creature lunges forward and grabs a soldier from behind while cackling maniacally. It lets out a creepy, high-pitched laugh right in his face. A monstrous entity lurks in the shadows with a glowing red eye. Then Domoto Rei's eyes flare a bright green as he thinks that he only has 30 seconds left. Domoto Rei grabs his attacker by the arms, struggling to keep the massive creature at bay. The beast lets out a deafening screech as the fierce struggle continues. He takes a direct hit that knocks the wind right out of him. He struggles against the immense pressure bearing down on his boots. Straining under the creature's massive strength, he tells himself he'll get crushed if he lets his guard down. As 15 seconds tick away, the terrifying beast screeches right above him. His eyes flare with a bright green glow as he prepares to counterattack. With 10 seconds left on the clock, he pushes back with everything he has. He lets out a fierce roar and brutally shatters the monster's arms. Blood sprays everywhere as he stands victorious amidst the gore. The creature lets out a shrieking cry as its severed limbs bleed out. He drops to a crouch, catching his breath. 10 seconds have passed since the clash. A menacing grin spreads across his face as he looks back up, next to the bloody severed arms. The terrifying creature strains against its heavy iron bonds. An announcement echoes through the area declaring that the exam is finished. The surviving recruits stand in neat rows for their next trial. Only about 20 trainees remain standing after the 5-minute endurance training against human-face spiders. Kaneko observes that those unfortunate guys got taken out by the neurotoxin and are completely out. He calls on number 11 to answer immediately. The trainee stammers out a guess involving Clover 7 and the moon. That answer is marked incorrect before number 5 jumps in with her own guess. He glares through his sunglasses, demanding to know if everyone failed to look properly and calling out number 78. Number 78 stands firm with a stern face, answering yes to his superior. As monstrous skeletal creatures loom in the background, number 78 identifies the speed and number 21 of a sword. And when he is asked if he's sure, he answers that he has no doubts. Frightening grotesque monsters fill the dark panel. Kaneko smirks, admitting it's not bad, and explaining that concentration matters more than physical ability, because observing human-face spiders without looking away is vital to survive over 200 monster species. Kaneko approaches number 78. Kaneko tells him he did well, and a sweating number 78 politely thanks him. An instructor announces that the 2nd and 3rd weeks of training are finished, adding that starting tomorrow, everyone gets a 5-day recovery period with permitted visitations. After resting, the 4th and final week of training will begin. Someone announces that everyone has done a good job over the long period and dismisses them. The subordinates immediately respond with a crisp affirmative. A curved line rests below the floating emblem. The senior officer addresses number 78 directly. He praises the recruit with a job well done, and number 78 softly thanks him in return. The instructor announces that weeks 2 and 3 of training have concluded, granting them a 5-day recovery period starting tomorrow where visits are allowed. After that break, they will begin the final week 4 training, and as the order to dismiss rings out, Robert shouts a prompt affirmative. A tactical backpack rests on a bright wooden floor. Exhausted from the grueling trials, Toma-san lies flat on his back and groans about how tired he is. He casually holds up a sharp stinger, inspecting it closely. He is glad he kept the human-faced spider stinger, figuring you never know what might happen in the final training. Akari explains that making it into the top 3 unlocks much more important missions. Toma-san sits up, admitting the training is tough, but it kind of feels like school days and remains fun. An instructor announces that their final task has finally arrived. Everyone is ordered to grab their guns and face the very beings that caused them to suffer. As instructions bark at them to finish the enemies with their own hands, a caged beast growls with glowing red eyes. He glares down the barrel of his rifle with a tense look on his face. Toma-san gasps in shock at the sight before him. Aimed at the target, Toma-san realizes these hostile creatures are the true enemies responsible for destroying their world. A commanding voice orders the squad to take aim. Instantly, the sharp command to fire rings out through the area. The squad unleashes a fierce barrage of gunfire straight into the target. Screeches echo as bullets rip through the creature. Core engineering gave rise to international terrorism, prompting a voice to state that they must be eradicated. He grimaces in tension as he prepares for what comes next. He tells his shivering comrade that it's already dead, but she breaks down crying about how much she suffered over the past 2 weeks. Toma-san looks disgusted, yet he steels himself because he has to do this. Someone reacts with surprise. He looks visibly stunned when someone points out his sudden physical change. Habu Takamichi notes that he has dropped a lot of weight, and he admits that it is true. Habu Takamichi asks how the training is going and what came out of the hole, leaving him confused. Akari mentions facing a human-faced spider, prompting Habu Takamichi to recall facing a Nahima back in his day. Hana asks if Akari went through that same training, and Akari smugly replies that she finished at the top of her class. Akari tells Toma-san to aim for the top 3, but he admits he is stuck in 16th place before she reminds him that the final high-scoring week is approaching. Habu Takamichi turns his attention elsewhere to speak with Hana-chan. Hana looks utterly shocked at the massive pile of food laid out before her. Akari remarks that awakened people eat a lot, though Hana still thinks the amount is excessive. Akari teasingly asks Hana if this is her first time bringing food for a guy, making her panic. Hatano cheerfully chimes in that people always bring way too much food when someone is starting out. As Hatano flashes a bright smug grin asking if he nailed it, Hana just glares at him in silence. Akari teases Hatano with a knowing smirk, asking if he is speaking from experience with an ex-girlfriend, and he casually admits 3 of them were like that. Hana immediately demands to know just how many ex-girlfriend he has, prompting Hatano to brush it off by saying he's had a fair number. Akari boasts that she never had any dating trouble before coming here, which prompts Hana to question if she really had no problems at all before cutting her off to eat. Outside the building, the office sign stands quietly near the window. Inside the office, evaluation papers are flipped through with training results. Trainee Kenta Kishi looks completely stunned as he stares down at the records. Kenta stands in tense silence, overwhelmed by a heavy blow to his pride. Overcome with a bitter sense of defeat, Kenta recalls how he awakened as a strength type at age 13 and climbed up through sheer grit despite coming from poverty. He had always been a standout talent who easily outshone his peers. Yet much like any early bloomer meeting a cruel wall, his progress hit a dead end and his growth stopped completely. As time went on, his agency and sponsors ditched him, yet he could never forget the sheer disappointment in the eyes of that last scout. He drowned his days in alcohol to cope with his shattered pride until he finally stumbled upon awakened combat training. Convinced this was his ultimate shot at a comeback, he figured his natural talent would carry him through the strict program. Even though it was just an outsourced education course, he was utterly confident he could easily breeze right past the competition. Standing in front of the scoreboards, he slams his fist against the wall in pure disbelief. His knuckles crash hard into the vertical board as frustration boils over. Checking the results, he realizes his 3rd week rank is a miserable 22nd place, leaving him dangerously close to failing. He spirals into shock, wondering how someone hailed as a genius since childhood could possibly crash this hard. Tormented by his dwindling standing, he demands to know why his skills and experience are losing out to ordinary trainees. His eyes widen in sheer panic as a very specific face pops into his mind. He fumes over number 78, a guy with zero knowledge or background who spent his first week turning pale and throwing up everywhere. Flashing back to the grueling outdoor drills, he remembers writing off that pathetic newbie as a total nobody. Yet despite taking a relentless beating, that same nobody refused to stay down, clawing his way up to earn the instructor's trust. He recalls how Tomasan blew past him and overtook him during the test. He admits he sort of suspected the guy had something deep inside his gut. Frustrated, he angrily crushes the training results paper in his fist. Even so, he thinks it is totally absurd for a guy like that to rank above him. Driven by anger, Robert throws open a door and storms down the hallway. He rushes past the lockers while muttering to himself in sheer disbelief. Convinced it is all rigged, he figures Tomasan must be cheating or working with an instructor. Robert is certain that Bastard used some underhanded trick to beat him. An announcement echoes out as the final exam begins. Helicopters fly in formation over the bright blue sea on their way to the exam. Inside the cabin, Kenta Kishi complains that the chopper is shaking too much and way too loud. Then Kenta Kishi tells everyone to listen up as they prepare for what is coming. An instructor announces over the radio that they are entering the training area and tells them to check their gear. One of the trainees suddenly tells the others to look out the window at the scenery below. Looking down from the sky, Number 2 remarks that it looks like a nice place for a final exam. However, Number 2 immediately counters that thought, refusing to let her guard down. She adds that she has a very bad feeling about this whole mission. The helicopters hover above the landing zone as the recruits prepare to rappel down. Soldiers clad in camouflage gear hold onto ropes inside a military helicopter flying high above. Up above, an unseen instructor reminds everyone that they already know the drill. Troops rappel down ropes toward Hiseki Island, a tiny place where some 200 people used to live. Demoto Ray listens as the briefing explains how a marine monster wiped out the whole area 2 months ago, leaving behind dangerous juveniles. Because of that, their final exam is an anti-monster extermination op, where each team handles their assigned zone. The commanding officer lays down the law. They have 2 days, and they better gather back on the beach tomorrow afternoon. Team 6 lines up right away as their leader barks orders to stay sharp. He pushes them to hurry up, warning that anyone who dawdles gets left behind. The leader yells that breaking orders puts their comrades in serious danger. Demoto Ray silently wonders if shouting like that is what's really dangerous with monsters around. Before the squad finally moves out, the team pushes through the dense forest foliage, creeping deeper into the danger zone. A soldier in tactical gear crouches near a dark doorway at the edge of the woods. Reaching the village entrance, the soldier warns his teammates to proceed with extreme caution. The team moves forward past wooden totem poles guarding the village entrance bridge. Raising their weapons, they spot strange ritual structures and wonder if the villagers followed some sort of religion. Suddenly, one soldier throws a heavy arm out to halt the advance. They stare in shock at a massive empty shed skin left hanging on the path. Examining the discarded hide, the team realizes whatever left it behind has recently molted. Demoto Ray's eyes suddenly flash with an intense green light as his senses flare. He immediately pivots around and warns his comrades that something is lurking at their 10 o'clock. Spotting a massive glowing eye hidden in the thick bushes, he asks if he should shoot. Another soldier immediately checks if he has a clear shot at the hidden target. A sharp projectile launches out from the foliage, tearing through the air toward them. Out in the woods, one of the soldiers calls out that their target got away. Without missing a beat, they charge after it, figuring out it slipped inside the community center. Outside the building, the commander orders number 78, number 11, and number 2 to handle the breach. He tells the rest of the squad to hold the rear, and they immediately snap back a "yes, sir." Peeking inside, one soldier curses under his breath because moss and slime are blocking his view. Annoyed by the delay, another soldier snaps at him to stop standing around and get moving. The team pushes through the doorway with weapons raised, stepping into the gloomy interior. Shadows stretch across the ruined floor as they sweep the murky corners. Scanning the dim space, the squad wonders where the monster vanished, while someone notices a strange odor. Suddenly, Demoto calls out for everyone to wait. Looking up, they are horrified to see a massive cluster of hanging pods, and number 2 gasps if they are all eggs. Before they can process it, she yells out in panic that the creature is right there. They spot the creature's webbed feet and lack of a dorsal fin, instantly identifying it as a bloodgill. The creature snarls in the dark, revealing its glowing eyes and sharp teeth. One soldier reports that 60 to 80 bloodgill eggs are stashed inside the building. A massive cluster of strange eggs hangs closely together in the dim light. He urges the others to fall back, since the defenseless eggs are not worth provoking right now. Another soldier turns around with glowing red eyes, utterly furious. The soldier's red eye glares intensely in the dim light. He snaps back, telling his comrade not to boss him around. Raising his rifle, he prepares to unleash sudden violence. Without warning, he opens fire directly into the cluster of eggs in a bloody frenzy. The brutal attack leaves the target completely shredded and dead. The other soldiers stare in stunned silence at the sudden slaughter. Out on patrol, one soldier harshly accuses another of trying to score points by reporting every little piece of garbage. He keeps mocking the companion, asking if that is really all it takes to impress someone. Calling the partner absolute trash, he waits for a reply, but the soldier just stands there in silence. Down on the ground nearby, a wounded creature lies in a pool of blood, letting out a low growl. Down on the ground, the wounded creature lets out a low growl. Suddenly, the fallen beast snaps its massive jaws wide open with terrifying speed. The soldiers turn around just in time, shouting in pure shock at the sudden movement. They stand frozen in disbelief as the monster wakes up right in front of them. Panicking completely, one of them asks what on earth they are supposed to do now. The creature leaps upward with immense force, launching itself away from the area. From above, the massive beast crashes down into the forest canopy, vanishing into the foliage. Hidden in the shadows, glowing red eyes peer through the leaves as someone realizes what is happening. Monsters charge forward with ferocious speed as chaos erupts around the area. A squad of soldiers opens fire on charging monsters at the steps. A soldier panics at the swarm, yelling for the instructor to evacuate inside immediately. Amidst the gunfire, soldiers urge everyone to hurry and fall back to the community center. Another soldier curses at the situation, urgently telling the instructor to get inside quickly. Ken Shiraiwa fights back from above, shouting that monsters are swarming everywhere. Someone demands to know where the endless horde of creatures keeps pouring in from. A monster smashes through a glass window, breaking into the building. Someone shouts that monsters are pouring in through the left window, ordering everyone to cover every entry point. As ammunition runs low, a frantic trainee demands reinforcements from Ken Shiraiwa, who stares in tense silence. Panicking over the sudden population explosion in just 2 months, a soldier frantically asks if Ken Shiraiwa requested reinforcements. Muttering in disbelief that the creatures should only eat fish, the panicked soldier stops dead in his tracks as Ken Shiraiwa reacts. A gloved hand aggressively reaches into a tactical vest to grab the radio. Demoto Ray grabs his radio to frantically report that Team 6 is completely surrounded by monsters and needs immediate backup. HQ responds over the comms, instructing Team 6 to report their current situation. Demoto Ray frantically informs HQ that over 300 bloodgills are swarming their location. HQ grimly replies that holding out with current forces is tough, promising to send exfil right away. Confused about the exfil order, Demoto Ray suddenly yells out a warning about the main gate. Demoto Ray drops to one knee and chambers a round into his rifle with a sharp click. A bloodgill screeches with its massive jaws wide open as it leaps forward. Someone shouts that reinforcements are on the way and tells everyone to hold out. The creatures roar as they attack, pushing the soldiers to keep firing. Sweat pouring down his face, Demoto Ray urges his comrades to hold on just a bit longer. A soldier opens fire through the window, screaming at the monsters to drop dead. Down on the floor, a motionless creature suddenly twitches its hand. Demoto Ray gasps in shock as a monster suddenly grabs him. He groans in pain as the creature drags him down. Terrified by the sudden ambush, the soldier lets out a frightened scream. He panics completely, yelling out in sheer terror. Someone calls out in panic that the right window has just been breached. As the center line starts to break, Demoto Ray desperately demands if the reinforcements have finally arrived. As monsters attack, one of the soldiers yells for everyone to fall back inside immediately. They scramble through the doors as a soldier frantically urges the others to hurry up. Panic sets in as she trips and stumbles, gasping in pure terror. A soldier's boot hits the floor as she struggles to regain her footing. A soldier cries out in pain as an attacker slams him to the ground. She stares back in absolute horror, screaming at the creature not to come any closer. Someone screams for help as the group presses forward, shouting for everyone to get into the restrooms. Pointing toward the back, a soldier realizes they might escape through the restroom window. A single small window shines brightly against the dark, overgrown walls of the facility. Taking a closer look at the opening, they realize the grave reality of their situation. With the exit too small and nowhere left to run, the cornered soldiers turn around and open fire in despair. Monsters take heavy fire. Soldiers yell out in battle. Enemies fall down defeated. A rifle clicks as it jams. A soldier realizes he is out of ammunition. Monsters close in on him. Kingfisher radios in a danger close airstrike target. An aerial projectile streaks toward the building. The projectile strikes the roof directly. A massive explosion obliterates the area. Debris flies through the air as an explosion rocks the area. A soldier collapses onto the dusty ground amidst the chaos. Radio contact comes through asking if anyone survived, and Domoto Ray manages to cough out that they are still alive. Realizing the monsters are wiped out, the survivors hear a helicopter crew drop a ladder and warn that more enemies are swarming in fast. Domoto Ray urges everyone to hurry, though Kentucky complains that dizziness is holding him back. As they move across the terrain, a sudden misstep sends someone tumbling. A sudden gasp escapes as the ground gives way beneath their feet. Falling through the air, Kentakishi plummets toward the rocky abyss below. Reacting instantly with wide eyes, Domoto Ray reaches out to catch the falling soldier. Looking up through the dust, Domoto Ray reacts with shock. Their gloved hands lock tightly together, just in time. One soldier grabs another by the arm, dangling precariously from a high ledge. Desperately reaching out, the trapped recruit screams for someone to pull them up. Panic sets in as the hanging soldier urges whoever is up top to hurry up. From above, a masked figure calls back, asking if they are all right while complaining that the roof blocks the view. With a chopper hovering overhead, the mysterious soldier demands they hurry up. Reaching out with a gloved hand, the shadowy figure shatters nearby rocks. Suddenly losing their grip, both recruits tumble backward into the empty air, screaming in terror. Out on the open sea, an extraction helicopter arrives as someone yells to hurry up with the stretcher. Down on the ship's deck, soldiers rush to load a badly wounded comrade into the chopper for immediate transport. Troops disembark from the helicopter as tension spikes on the deck. Kaneko explodes in rage, slamming his fist against the bulkhead and demanding if this is some kind of joke. Ishida Keizo glares intensely at a terrified soldier up close while shouting angrily at him. Addressing Nate's personnel officer, Kaneko demands to know how he can possibly call himself a commander. Kaneko chews him out for losing track of number 2 and number 78, refusing to accept any apologies. The shaken officer explains that number 2 slipped while moving to the chopper, and number 78 got dragged down after trying to help. When asked if that's really true, the commander insists he saw the whole thing with his own eyes. The soldier silently prays he can somehow just let this nightmare pass him by. Gritting his teeth in disgust, Kaneko calls them all pathetic fools. He orders them to head right back onto the island and rescue the fallen as soon as reinforcements arrive. With glowing red eyes, the furious officer demands the retrieval of any remains, even if they are just shreds of clothing. Moments later, Kishi gasps as water droplets fall onto his face. Sitting up alone in a dark, rocky cave, the young trainee wonders where he is. Recalling the harrowing plunge, he remembers falling backward into the dark abyss. He wonders why Kishi did such a thing to him. Holding his injured arm in pain, he calls out for help. Startled by a sound, he begs desperately for someone to help him. Domoto Ray spots someone trapped under the rubble and tells them to wait a second. He reacts urgently as he reaches out toward the fallen debris. Onda lies injured and motionless on the rocky ground. Domoto Ray rushes to her side and promises to help her right away. He reaches out and pulls the wounded soldier up from the cold floor. Domoto Ray inspects her leg and realizes the injury is terrible, noting that even with regeneration abilities it looks bad. Onda insists that she is fine and can still walk on her own. But she wobbles immediately, and Domoto Ray catches her while telling her it is okay. She breaks down in tears, begging him not to leave her behind. Domoto Ray looks down at her with a calm expression. He hands her a rifle and asks if she can hold a gun. Crouching down, he tells her to get on his back. He carries her across the dark cavern. Domoto Ray notes that the cave was not made by humans and wonders how nobody noticed such a massive bloodgill nest. Grimacing from the strain, Domoto Ray checks on her, realizing her leg might be infected because the hemostatic agent was not enough. As he carries her through the dark, Domoto Ray tells her not to fall asleep. Trying to keep her awake, the young man asks for her name. Onda looks surprised that he doesn't know her after all their time together during training. Apologizing for being out of it, he gives his name as Togaku Saiki, leaving her a bit miffed. Onda suddenly asks if he is actually Toma Ito, making Domoto Ray panic before she remembers he is right. She narrows her eyes with a knowing look, while Domoto Ray stays silent. Onda calls him out for using a fake name and asks if he's a wealthy scion, but Domoto Ray just blames personal circumstances. Despite everything, Domoto Ray insists that help will eventually come for them. Onda suddenly asks him why he bothered to save her. With a calm smile, Domoto Ray reminds her that she was the one who asked for help in the first place. Onda tells him to leave her behind since they will both go down at this rate. She urges him to push on alone if things get rough, casually dropping that she has insomnia. Demoto Ray admits that whenever he tries to sleep, he hears resentful, crying voices. He adds that they sound so incredibly sad. When asked if someone resents him, Demoto Ray replies that it is the people who died because of him. With glowing green eyes, he swears that he will never let anyone die in front of him again. Suddenly, a voice calls out to the instructor. Ishida Keizo turns around as a soldier hands him a document about an old custom on Hiseki Island, leaving him shocked. Ishida Keizo stares intently at the alarming report. Furious, Ishida Keizo demands to know if upper management knew all along, and orders reinforcements to rush to Hiseki Island immediately. They move through a dark area marked by sacred ropes. Anda points out that the rope looks just like the one at the village entrance, but Demoto Ray stays silent. Looking at the ritual rope, Demoto Ray wonders if monsters could actually make something like that. As he carries her through the cave, Anda asks what he is talking about. Demoto Ray tells her he finally figured out why the bloodgills are on the island, leaving his companion totally confused. He recalls the instructor saying marine species normally eat fish instead of humans, before pointing ahead to a grim sight. They stare down in horror at a massive pile of human bones scattered across the ground. He points out that the remains are tied with rope, questioning if bloodgills could possibly tie people up. Demoto Ray realizes humans tied them up and dropped them as sacrifices to the monsters, leaving Anda speechless. Stunned by the horrifying realization, she stammers out a question. With a grim expression, Demoto Ray states his frightening conclusion. He declares that the people of the island were actually worshipping the monsters. Toma carries the wounded Reina through a dark cavern filled with giant skeletal remains. Reina points out that bloodgills lack the strength to sink ships, realizing something else must be behind the attacks. She reasons that the villagers must have sunk the ships and abducted crews as sacrifices to pray for prosperity. She adds that the creature in the community center hesitated to call allies because it was already used to humans. Toma reacts in shock as Reina suddenly stops him and spots a ladder ahead. Pointing urgently into the dark tunnel, she calls out that there is a ladder right over there. Approaching the ladder, Reina notices a faint light above, though something seems to be blocking the exit. Toma looks up and realizes that a ladder inside a monster nest confirms this was truly a place for sacrifices. Urging Toma to hurry so they can climb, Reina suddenly cuts herself off in pure terror. Wide-eyed and trembling, she whispers his name and warns him to look behind himself. Toma widens his eyes in shock and spins around to face whatever is lurking behind him. Massive clawed hands step heavily onto the dark cave floor from the shadows. A towering monster with glowing yellow eyes looms directly over Toma in the darkness. A heavy stone hand slams against the dark ground with immense force inside the cavern. Down in the dark cave, he stands ready while Reina climbs up a wooden ladder. Toma realizes he completely forgot something obvious, given the massive number of bloodgills around. He deduces that it wouldn't be strange at all for there to be a queen ruling over them. Toma watches closely and notes that the massive beast is simply observing their every move. Toma urges Reina to go up the ladder first, but she reminds him he has no bullets left. Reina insists she cannot leave him behind as a giant threat looms right beside them. Refusing to flee alone, Reina begs Toma to secure the exit for both of them instead. The giant creature brings its glowing yellow eye terrifyingly close to Toma's face. He strikes the monstrous creature directly in its head with a forceful blow. The wounded beast roars in agony as it lunges forward during the violent clash. Reina screams in pain and urges him to hurry up and climb to safety. The giant creature opens its massive jaws wide, howling with terrifying fury. Dark blood spurts from the monster's neck after sustaining a severe injury. Toma taunts the wounded beast, asking if there is a hole in its neck, making it unable to speak. The creature swings its massive arm with overwhelming speed and destructive power. Toma narrowly dodges the wild attack while leaping away from the charging monster. Boulders rain down from above as a dark monster shields itself against the barrage. Reina screams in terror as falling rocks smash against the metal structure around her. Toma rushes forward with his knife drawn to engage the towering bloodgill monster. He scrambles quickly across the dark terrain, keeping low and moving fast. Toma slides across the rocky ground, kicking up debris as he maneuvers through the cave. He dashes past a massive creature, narrowly dodging its swift and deadly strike. The terrifying creature shrieks loudly as its massive claw slashes through the empty air. Toma reasons that fighting this creature is simpler than dealing with a human-faced spider. He lets out a fierce battle cry, charging forward to confront the monster head-on. He leaps powerfully off the ground, but he knows there is a major problem. Toma realizes that his stamina has already reached its absolute limit. Extreme hunger has signaled his physical limit ever since his awakening, and he used his last recovery potion earlier. He knows that if the fight drags on, he will quickly fall into a severe disadvantage. Reina watches with wide, worried eyes as the fierce combat unfolds before her. She works desperately to pry open the overhead hatch, trying to find a way out. Akari calls out that the escape door is completely blocked by something heavy. Down in the cavern, a monstrous creature lunges forward as Toma tries to fend it off. Kenta desperately slams his hand against the sealed metal door, begging it to open. The towering creature strikes downward with terrifying force, smashing into the ground. Crouched on the rocky floor with a knife in hand, Toma spots an opening. He resolves that aiming for the monster's neck and reaching its airway could defeat it. Telling himself he only has one chance, he prepares for a final desperate assault. The soldier bursts into a sprint across the cavern floor toward the wounded beast. The terrifying creature glares back with glowing yellow eyes in the dim light. Vowing to finish it in one strike, Toma lunges forward with his knife. The beast reacts instantly, swinging its heavy arm toward him. Toma's eyes widen in shock as the monster intercepts his attack. A giant green hand squeezes tightly around his torso, holding him completely helpless in its grip. Choking and gritting his teeth, he struggles helplessly in its iron grip. The towering creature lifts him completely off the ground in the dark cavern. Toma cries out in pain as the beast crushes his arm with terrifying force. The monster hoists Toma up by the wrist, swinging him down with brutal momentum. Shocked by the devastating impact, Toma reacts with wide-open eyes. Blood sprays from his mouth as he groans in agony from the crushing blow. Without stopping, the queen repeatedly batters his body against the cavern floor. Covered in blood, Toma realizes he is going to die at this rate. He panics inwardly, knowing he no longer has a weapon to defend himself. Desperate for a way out, he catches sight of a sharp blade lying nearby. Hanging limply by the arm, Toma breathes heavily as he tries to endure the pain. The towering creature bares its massive, terrifying teeth with a menacing look. Reina screams out for him to pull himself together as things turn desperate. The beast opens its jaws wide and tightens its iron grip around him. Toma hangs limply in the monster's grip, completely overpowered and bleeding. Refusing to give up, Toma draws his knife in silence. With a sudden burst of energy, Toma drives his blade straight into the creature's mouth. The blade plunges deep into the monster's tongue, dealing a critical blow. The giant beast's golden eye widens in shock and sudden pain. The monster's grip loosens as the venom takes hold. The human-faced spider's poison needle finally takes full effect, crashing the beast down. Toma manages to slip away from the monster's failing grasp. The Bloodgill Queen writhes in agony from the poison and the knife wound. The monstrous beast lets out a deafening screech as it faces off against him. Pushing past his absolute limits, he furiously smashes down on the monster with all his might. The terrifying creature suddenly counterattacks, striking him with brutal force. Toma gasps in agony as blood bursts from his chest from the devastating blow. The massive monster looms close, its yellow eye locked onto its bleeding prey. With a crushing slam, the heavy rock falls and crushes the monstrous threat. Toma drops to his knees on the cold floor, severely wounded and barely conscious. A heavy stone comes crashing down into the cavern floor right beside the defeated foe. Left alone in the dark, Toma struggles to stay upright as blood pools around him. Muttering to himself in desperation, Toma forces his broken body to keep moving. Driven by pure survival, Toma starts climbing the ladder toward the light. Out in the dense jungle, a squad leader barks orders for everyone to fan out and search for the missing squad members. The commander directs Team B to track down the Bloodgill nest, while the rest keep hunting for the missing troops. He repeats his orders over the comms, making sure every single soldier except Team B joins the search. A young soldier stands frozen in shock as he gazes ahead. Stepping closer to the trees, he mutters that they finally found them. He stares in stunned silence at the grim sight before him. Flashback 2 hours ago on a search party helicopter, where Kenta Kishi worries the incident will wipe out their final training scores and decides he needs to rack up some points. Back in the present, Kishi grits his teeth in frustration, cursing those lucky bastards number 2 and number 78 if they survived, wondering how they managed to escape through that hole. Kishi approaches a heavy manhole cover resting beside a dark opening in the ground. Peering down into the deep subterranean shaft, he wonders if that was the exact route they used to climb up. He brushes off his worries, figuring he is all alone out here right now. He looks down at the forest canopy and decides Lady Luck is on his side. Realizing a gun would leave too much evidence, he decides against using it. He figures he just needs to drop the body down a deep hole where nobody will find it. Dragging the body forward, Toma tells himself there is no turning back and he will take the credit. He hopes this will finally make him a hunter and earn his parents' approval. Suddenly, a voice rings out telling him to stop right there. Anda aims her rifle, ordering him not to move and to let the body go. Panicking, he tries to calm her down, claiming he saw her running away back at the community center. She gives him a final warning with glowing red eyes, demanding he let Toma go. Instead of obeying, the soldier suddenly bursts into a creepy laugh. Startled by the laughter, she demands to know what is so funny and threatens to shoot. With a smug little grin, he tells her to stop trying to act tough. He asks if she really thought he wouldn't notice what she was up to. He realizes her gun isn't loaded and fires back in a panic. The shot hits him squarely in the chest, sending a bloody spray flying. Stumbling backward, Robert gasps in disbelief and asks why this is happening. He stammers that there shouldn't even have been a magazine inside the weapon. Number 2 calls him an idiot, pointing out that checking the chamber is basic procedure. Panicking for his life, Robert begs her to stop and talk things out. Refusing to listen, she swings her rifle down hard, declaring he has no right to be a hunter. With pure fury in her eyes, Number 2 curses him out as an absolute piece of trash. Photos of past missions and military gear rest quietly on a wooden cabinet. Ken Shiraiwa sits inside his office with a scarred face, looking over his desk. Ken Shiraiwa tells someone to come in as the door receives a knock from outside. Kishi opens the door and steps inside, offering a salute before being told to sit down. Ken Shiraiwa asks about Anda's condition, learning she suffered major injuries but will recover enough to work as a hunter. Ken Shiraiwa casually remarks that a prosthetic leg would have suited her, leaving Kishi to process the grim thought. A week passes since the training was suspended. Ken Shiraiwa explains that an islander's son confessed to the monster worship, revealing the villagers saw bloodgills as Dragon King messengers. The monsters were actually just coming to eat the fish, making the villagers' beliefs foolish. Ken Shiraiwa adds that Kishi faces the death penalty for violating criminal law and the Awakener special law. Ken Shiraiwa feels he has no right to judge Kishi since he lost 2 trainees under his watch. Kishi reassures the instructor that the tragedy was not his responsibility. Ken Shiraiwa admits things could have gone terribly wrong before telling Kishi to judge him however he sees fit after apologizing to the families. He reacts in utter shock, wondering how he could ever presume to judge his own instructor. The instructor goes on to offer to step down or even leave the military entirely, offering a recommendation letter from command. He adds that despite his appearance, he actually holds quite a bit of influence. Kishi stares back with wide eyes, wondering internally if the man is actually being serious. Ken Shiraiwa holds a steady, intense gaze. Kishi narrows his eyes in silence. Kishi figures that since the instructor already met with the families, there is nothing left for him to say. Standing up from the sofa, the instructor changes the subject and asks if Kishi wants to come work with them. He offers to pull strings to commission Kishi into the Special Forces Division, promising stable pay and a solid pension. After Kishi politely declines, the instructor looks over and asks if he is aiming to become a hunter too. Kishi thinks back to a hooded figure standing in the rain, explaining that he's not aiming for it because he has a mission. The instructor realizes that his earlier remarks belittling hunters must have genuinely offended the young trainee. Ken Shiraiwa points out that his time as a hunter cost him a leg, explaining that the work is just too harsh. He warns that it is better not to become a hunter because they are treated like mere consumables. He asks if that is why the training is so brutal, noting they are valued just for being stronger and cheaper than an armored vehicle. Ken Shiraiwa admits it is true, adding that their enemies cannot be defeated with ordinary guns and swords. He recalls working with the world's strongest hunter in the past, noting he was just a human, and warns that hunters are ultimately disposable pawns. Ken Shiraiwa tells Kishi he likes him but worries about his future, leaving the young trainee confused. He criticizes Kishi's vow to protect everyone, arguing that such people are either extreme narcissists or full of self-hatred, and advises him to live for himself first. Ken Shiraiwa pours a drink to lift Kishi's spirits. He raises his flask with a friendly smile and drinks to Kishi's good fortune. He bows his head and expresses his deep gratitude. With a polite nod, he offers his sincere thanks. Ken Shiraiwa and he share a quiet drink in the room. As Toma turns to leave, Ken Shiraiwa tells him to wait a minute. Ken Shiraiwa almost forgets something important and hands over a folder. Toma looks down at the document with a stunned expression. Toma reads the certificate and realizes he somehow secured second place. Ken Shiraiwa explains that instructor Haibara mentioned he needed it, praising his well-deserved result. Toma agrees with a smile and thanks him once again. Ken Shiraiwa stands alone inside the office as the door clicks shut. He clinks his metal flask against another flask sitting on the desk. Ken Shiraiwa remarks that the kid looks exactly like someone else. Staring at the engraved initials on the flask, he asks if Ray thinks so too. The facility building stands under a bright daytime sky with clouds. Kanbayashi asks Ray how he managed second place, while Habu congratulates him on his success at Haseki Island. Ray gives a modest reply, grinning as Habu expresses disbelief that he actually pulled it off. Habu waves off the papers and tells Kanbayashi to show Ray around their new workplace. He reaches out and pulls the heavy glass door open to step inside. Kanbayashi suddenly leaps onto Ray from behind in a tight chokehold, demanding to know what tricks he used. Struggling for air, Ray gasps that it was his actual skill, not any trick. Kanbayashi warns him about talking back to his senior, but Ray points out she is younger than him. Ray holds out a brown envelope containing his new identity documents. He explains that the file contains everything under Toma Ito, while noting his headquarters badge arrives tomorrow. David dashes through the corridor in a rush, leaving his colleagues behind. Kanbayashi calls out after him, telling him not to run inside the halls. Standing by the notice board, the agents wonder if his name is pronounced Debido in Romaji. As he sprints past again, she notes that he always seems terribly busy. Because of recent suspicious movements, he has been assigned as a helper for the intelligence team. Akari hands over an operation manual, noting that nobody intercepts radio signals better than him. He looks through a box of fake IDs and tells Toma to keep his passport ready at all times. Toma looks up in surprise, asking if they are heading out somewhere. Akari flashes a passport and announces they are heading straight to Colombia. She adds that sunscreen is a must since it is early summer over there, leaving Toma speechless. Stunned by the sudden announcement, Toma can only ask why it has to be so abrupt.